Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily News. I'm Nicholas Richardson. A stream of lies, slander and threats against, in theory, partners, in response to attempts to straighten and explain the obvious facts. The UN Security Council debated Ukraine on the sidelines of the New York summit. A joint resolution is out of the question, as is any constructive action by this body. The reason is a permanent member of the Council, Russia. 2.5 years of genocide, war crimes and aggression that has resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. Not a day goes by that Russian missiles and bombs don't fall on Ukrainian cities. Despite this, Russia still sits on one of the world's most important councils, which years ago was supposed to be a guarantor of stability and peace, the United Nations Security Council. Today, a completely impotent caricature of the idea on which its founding was based.
A permanent seat on this Security Council is not a privilege, it is a responsibility. A grave responsibility bestowed on only 5 nations to be the guardians of world peace. Today, some of these members are not living up to their responsibility.
This seemingly obvious remark falls here for the third time. In February 2022, Russia, being a permanent member of the Council, trampled on essentially all of its basic principles. Nonetheless, the Russian ambassador still sits at the table.
Преподавал нам уроки империализма.
To cite examples of lies and manipulations of the Russian representative on the Council, it is a waste of time and attention. It's a repetition of Kremlin propaganda that has nothing to do with reality. What is puzzling, however, is the self-confidence of the Russian representative at the United Nations, as if they know that no one will move them from here.
From Gaza to Ukraine to Sudan and beyond, wars grind on, suffering grows, anger deepens, lives are upended, and legitimacy and effectiveness of the United Nations and this Council are undermined.
Because the Council has essentially become a body without decision-making power. Resolutions, recommendations, attempt to build peacekeeping missions, everything is torpedoed by Russia's veto, sometimes with China's complicity. The whole institution has become such a dummy. It has become an instrument that is super unspectacular from the point of view of world peace and very effective from the point of view of individual powers. Security Council reform would have to mean the possibility of removing a permanent member in the event of a violation of international law. The need for United Nations reform was explicitly mentioned by the Polish president. Many political interests intertwine and collide. Therefore, reforming such an organization is not easy, but a summit for the future serves to show how the United Nations should prepare and respond to challenges. Moreover, such a reform of the Council may not necessarily be to the liking of not only China and Russia, but also the United States or the United Kingdom. There is no shortage of examples in recent history of Washington's rather clear-cut violations of international law, such as the invasion of Iraq, which could not be explained by self-defense, and Iraq's weapons of mass destruction turned out to be an intelligence lie to justify the attack on Hussein's regime. The cleanup is still underway in Lądek-Zdrój and surrounding towns after the passage of the floodwater, which ravaged the area. Many buildings have been completely destroyed, and the landscape in many places resembles that of the post-war period. I do not know what to do. I recently bought this apartment. I have already lived here for 3 years, and now where will I go? Some of the flood victims live with their families, some in local centres. Mud from roads, sidewalks and houses is already cleared up. Most of the things from flooded apartments have already been taken away by the services. Now their place on the properties has been replaced by rubble because residents have been scraping plaster off the walls. Next, the buildings will have to be dried and disinfected. What can be said? People should take more interest. A lot of people come to work, but there are not enough hands to work. Before the city turned into one big river, Father Viktor Bednarczyk tried to save what he could. Satisfied, I already wanted to return to the rectory to inform the parish priest that it was okay. Suddenly, a 1.5-metre wall of water overwhelmed me and carried me away a few metres, and then I somehow managed to reach the windowsill by grabbing onto whatever I could, including some bushes that were around me. I lasted on the windowsill for 2 hours, where the cold water flowed over me up to my knees. The water in Lądek-Zdrój, but not only there, is not yet drinkable. There is also no electricity in some places. Businesses are waiting for an announcement of when the connections will be restored. as much as for an announcement from the state about business assistance.
Niektórzy przedsiębiorcy to mieli...
Some businesses had water up to the ceiling. Something fell inside, smashed the window, water poured in, and as in a washing machine, everything got muddy and flowed out. So some companies have terrible losses. Some hotels have halted reservations for the winter season starting in Lower Silesia in December. They're waiting to see whether the infrastructure can be rebuilt to accommodate tourists. Is the government hiding the real number of flood victims? This is the question opposition politicians are increasingly asking, because it turns out that the official statistics only include cases of people who died as a direct result of drowning. Other victims are classified, for example, as victims of traffic accidents or construction accidents. Asking about this tragic statistic, however, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk calls it black propaganda and appeals to the media to report only information from his subordinate departments. 7 deaths and 1 missing person. These are the official flood statistics reported by the government. Opposition politicians, however, say the number of tragic flood deaths could be higher. In Nowy Svetov, I came across such a house where there was a son of the owner who asked us to take everything out of the house because it was not usable. I ask, and where is the owner? The gentleman tells me that unfortunately she died. I say, when did she die? Well, during this wave. So this is a victim of the flood. He says, no, because the gentleman came and said it was a heart attack, so she's not a flood victim. Similar information about more deaths that were not classified as caused by the flood is also trickling down to other politicians. I, as an MP, received a report that there was a situation where a person drowned while in a car. I, of course, do not know if this is true information. I can only rely on information that reached me from what seems to be a sensible internet user. The person who drowned in the car was not recognized as a person who died as a result of flooding, but it was counted as a car accident. So the actual number of flood victims may not only be much higher than the one reported by the government, but also already forever hidden. We have information from the cities most affected about the fact that in individual cases of these victims, according to people who live there, from the information that they have from friends, there have been obituaries pasted on walls, on poles, and these obituaries are more than the number of victims given by the government. So, Mr. Editor, I'm afraid that journalists are left to drive through the most devastated cities and count the number of funerals, because we may never get other statistics. Asked about information appearing in the public space about the growing number of flood victims, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called it black propaganda and misinformation. This is very devastating. You know how people must feel when they hear this kind of fake news. After all, no one has the time or especially there on the ground to verify this information. Perhaps. But on the other hand, if the information about more victims was confirmed, it could cause public outrage. If there are any fatalities, if the number of fatalities is greater than what is said, well, someone must be responsible for that. Responsibility for the fact that these people were not warned in time, and then it would be difficult for Tusk to explain himself. So absolutely, this is not information that he would like to see being repeated in the media. Today, Tusk is appealing to the media to report only official information from his subordinate services about the number of flood victims. But during the crisis on the border with Belarus, it was the media favourable to him that eagerly published fake news about alleged bodies buried in the forest there. I remember earlier cases when various stations with the yellow stripe were directly saying that victims of Kaczynski, victims of law and justice, etc. And now what? Now we are supposed to talk about the victims of Tusk? The police, in an official announcement, dismissed rumours of more flood victims. However, all of the victims included in the statistics died as a result of drowning. Police are also asking people to report as soon as possible information about people they have lost contact with. In Londek-Zdrój, an elementary school was completely destroyed. Thanks to your big hearts and generosity, the Republika Foundation has donated 3 million zloty for its reconstruction.
$3 million zloty. That's how much we raised for the school in Londek-Zdrój. This is what the primary school number 1 in Londek-Zdrój looks like now. Until recently, a place teeming with life. Today, damaged floors, plaster falling off the walls, damaged benches, chairs, and electronic equipment. It is difficult to hide the emotion. This is simply a beautiful gesture of the state. We did not expect such a sum. This is almost half of our needs. So you are saving half of our school. The management makes no secret of the fact that the needs are enormous. but there is already a plan for what to renovate first. The most urgent need is to restore heating, then the renovation of the school's cloakroom and the spaces that are directly under the classrooms. At the same time, we would like to also start the renovation of the gym, which has been completely destroyed. The elementary school is important to residents and local authorities. 3 million zloty is a sizable part of our annual budget. You are unbelievable, both the representatives of the Republika Foundation and viewers who contributed to the funds. On behalf of the entire community, I can thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thanks to this money, the process of rising from the rubble, because you can see that we are here in ruins, thanks to you, this process will be really fast. 3 million zloty. These funds will be a significant support in the reconstruction of the school in Lądek-Zdrój. We set up this foundation to help Republika Television, but we wrote in there such goals as helping victims of disasters, because among the 10 million viewers, there could be people who need help. This foundation is not so that Republika can grow. This foundation is for our viewers to have a better life. But this is not the only place where the funds raised thanks to our viewers will go. We want some of this money to go towards buying washing machines, refrigerators, televisions. Apart from donations to the Republika Foundation, it turns out that people have been donating to other accounts that were set up for independent media, for example. So we will collect all this money and we will allocate it to help ordinary people. Those in power, despite warnings from the Institute of Meteorology and Water Management and the European Union, have failed to take action to avoid the worst. You were greatly embarrassed today by Republika Television, the very television that you do not allow on different panels, organized by Prime Minister Donald Tusk. This television station which donated more than 3 million zloty for the renovation of the school in Lądek-Zdrój, and unfortunately the Ministry of Education did nothing. About 5 million zloty is needed to rebuild the school. The funds that have been raised thanks to our viewers will be a significant support. If everything goes according to plan, students will return to classes in early October. Without your help, this would not have been possible. Thank you.
That's the news. Thank you for watching, and from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.